Look, it's my job to help win elections. I'm not an attorney. I'd really be interested in what law the president's broken, because nobody has articulated that. But let me just say this, from a political standpoint, this is gonna benefit the campaign, the president's reelection campaign, no doubt about it. And I think that you've already lost 2 Democrats on the initial vote in the House, and you're gonna lose more. And I don't know a single Republican that the Democrats are gonna pick up. One of the things that they've done, and this started with the Justice Kavanaugh hearing, is they've united sort of the establishment never Trump Republicans with the rest of the Republican Party. And if you saw any disillusion or weakness on that, you would have seen that in some of the votes that were cast. And you're not gonna see that in the vote that gets cast, whether it's today, tomorrow, or the next day. And you'll just see. I mean, my prediction on this, I think it's gonna be pretty well found out, so looking forward to seeing.
You know, I think Bob is right in the fact that this has fueled the base for President Trump. When you look at how much money he's raised within 72 hours of the impeachment hearing being announced, I think it was like $15 million in small dollar donations. So, you know, this is fueling the fundraising side for the Republicans, but at the same time, it's fueling the base for the Democrats. And the Democratic Party is raising money as well, and they're putting together their ground effort. They are putting up candidates that are against vulnerable Republican candidates across the country, and I think that you are going to see a shift in how these people vote.
So, Derek, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. You are a Democrat, and you might be one of only 4 or 5 people in the country that have not filed to actually run for a Democrat that has not run for president in this primary. So you are.
I tell you what, he'd be a great candidate. But Derek's too smart to run for office.
But I'm curious of, do you have any thoughts or predictions in terms of how you see the primary playing out? And then this is maybe a twofold question. I was telling Bob before we started, so I am from a very large Irish Catholic family, east of Cleveland, very blue collar, lifetime Democrats, and I would say probably half of my family voted for President Trump in the last election, which is unheard of. What can Democrats do to get those voters back into the fold?
Well, let me answer that question first, and then I'll go back to your first question. So the reason why President Trump prevailed in this state, in my opinion, is because Democrats weren't listening to his base. They weren't listening to rural voters, and simply weren't talking to them. You know, the strategy, again, in my opinion, was all wrong. We were talking to folks in major cities, but we were talking to maybe first-ring suburbs of those metropolitan areas. But beyond that, we weren't really talking to folks that are out in rural communities. And a lot of people that used to be Democrats that were in Rust Belt communities, that were manufacturing jobs and blue-collar jobs have left, those folks felt ignored. So here comes President Trump, or candidate Trump at the time, who was saying, make America great again. And that slogan caught on, and he started talking to the voters that felt neglected. So that's the reason why now President Trump won the state. Now, to answer your first question, you know, there's 15 and counting candidates on the Democratic side. I think that Vice President Biden has the best chance of prevailing, and quite honestly, he's the only candidate, in my opinion, that can beat Donald Trump. I think they speak each other's language when talking to the American people and fighting for the American people. And everybody else has some good traits or qualities about them, but they are not breaking through the Democratic stronghold. So I think that if I had to make a prediction, Biden is going to win this state for the primary, and he's going to be our nominee moving forward.
So in 2016, then candidate Trump won Ohio roughly 52 to 44 over Hillary. I'm curious of what do you see looking forward in terms of what are the keys for President Trump's reelection here in Ohio?
Well, let me agree with part of what Derek said, because I think he's absolutely right. President Trump came to Ohio in 2016 and articulated a conservative working class message, a message that resonated with independents and disaffected Democrats about turning the economy around, putting people back to work, dealing with these very bad trade deals like NAFTA, taking it straight to the Chinese and pushing back, not just on trade deals, but on currency manipulation and IP theft, and really standing up for the American working men and women in this country. And that resonated. And nothing, I mean, we had a ground game, we did things. You don't get an 8.5 point victory because you knocked on a bunch of doors. You get that because you have a message that drives through. We've got Republicans that are getting elected in Ashtabula County at the county level. That's something that was unheard of. There was a 30-point swing in that county from Obama to Trump. And again, it was because of the message. And here's the thing. When a populist gets elected, one of the hardest things for a populist candidate to do is to stick with that messaging. You know, to stick with what they campaigned on. Usually they get in, they start compromising, they do things, they get away from what they promised. So, but now President Trump, he's governed the way he's campaigned. Everything he promised he would do has gotten done or has been obstructed either by Democrats or a failure for some Republicans to get something done. And the American voters, the people that voted for him, know that. And so for his campaign, for him, it's not going to be much different. He's going to continue to talk about the issues that he did in 2016. He's going to talk about what the promises made, promises kept, and then he's going to talk about what's left to do. And to me, you know, being on a re-election campaign, which I'd done before in 2004, that's a great place to be as a candidate. And that's what you're going to see here in 2020. And I'm confident he's going to win Ohio again and going to get re-elected.
Derek, if you look back at the last couple general elections, clearly I think there are some now that really are starting to wonder, is Ohio really a purple state any longer? You know, certainly the last gubernatorial election and then 2016, I think there's some general feeling that maybe Ohio really is just kind of turning red, and parts of Ohio are deep red. Do you think, do you think that there is a message that can resonate with to kind of turn Ohio back purple, but also should Democrats, as they look into 2020 at the national level, will they still consider Ohio in the playbook, or will they look for a path elsewhere?
Well, first of all, what a great state we live in, first and foremost. I mean, if you want to study politics, if you want to watch politics, if you want to be in politics, this is the state to do it. Ohio is still a swing state. When you go back to the election that Bob and I worked on back in 2000, so President Bush won the state by what, 3 percentage points, right around
3.5.
Right, 3.5.
But in fairness, I know where Derek's going with this, because we had polling in September that had us 10 points up, and the Gore campaign pulled out of Ohio, which was insane.
That's right. That's right. So President Bush wins the state in 2000, gets reelected in 2004, right? And then you have President Obama that wins in 2008 and 2012. And so you had two terms of, since 2000, 2 terms of Republican presidency, 2 terms of Democratic presidency, and then going into where we're at now, the 2016 race. Then you have President Trump. So we're going to turn that tide back around to Democrats in 2020 when we beat the president in his re-election bid. So Ohio's a swing state. I mean, you can look at just about any poll out there that shows you that you cannot win the presidency without winning the state of Ohio. I'll give you just a quick example of how Republicans fallen short in some suburban communities. So part of the reason why the Democratic debate was held in Westerville is because when you look at, Westerville is a suburb of Columbus. So Romney beat Obama back in 2012, 53% to 45%. Clinton won when she ran 50% to 45%, despite losing the whole state to President Trump. So you're looking at some of these suburban communities that used to be red that are now turning blue. Look at Franklin County. 20 years ago, Franklin County was a red county. Now, Franklin County and all of the city of Columbus is Democrat. So the demographics are shifting, and you're seeing that some of these first-ring suburban communities are now starting to turn blue. So this state is very much still a swing state.
I would agree with that. I think that there's a tendency in politics, particularly with the press. Do we have any folks with the press here? I love the press. They treat me good. Joking. But it's hard for them to do their jobs. In fairness to them, they got to take something as complex and dynamic as an American election and try to can bring it down into something very 600, 700, 800 words, whatever. It is the process. The political process in this state is much more complicated than that. And while I disagree with Derek in what he's saying about the results in 2020, I'd say that those shifts are taking place there's shifts happening in both types of counties. And, you look at what's happening in Franklin or Cuyahoga County, but then you look at what's happening in Ashtabula County, where it isn't just President Trump came in and did a 30-point flip. You now have a competitive county where county level Republicans are getting elected. So some of the rural counties, it used to be when Bill Clinton won Ohio, it was this C shape that started in Toledo, went around north, down to eastern Ohio, down along the Ohio River bottom. That's just not there anymore. You've got, like, if you look at the map, the county map in Ohio, not just for the president's victory, but Mike DeWine's victory, you see blue counties in the major urban areas, and you see red counties everywhere else. And a guy by the name of Bill Bishop wrote a book in 2009 called The Big Sort. And Democrats and Republicans are geographically self-selecting where they live, where Democrats consolidating in urban counties and Republicans in suburban and rural. And so what Bill was talking about in 2009, I think, has gotten even more stark, and you don't just see it on the Ohio map, you see it on the national map as well. But make no mistake, Ohio is not Missouri, okay? It is a battleground state. It will continue to be a battleground state for a while. And honestly, the only chance we have of removing that is keeping with a conservative working class message. If people can take what, from a policy standpoint, what Trump has done with the Republican Party and continue that in state government and continue that for several election cycles, we might see that shift, but it's not coming anytime soon.
So sorry if you wanted to actually be able to watch TV and not see the endless campaign commercials is what you're saying. I think this mic died. Can you hear me? Yep, okay. So actually we should have, I just read today, kind of a quick tidbit. This is the 19-year anniversary of when the Supreme Court certified the election results of Gore v. Bush. So happy anniversary to you too.
Oh, what fun.
So I'm going to shift actually, Derek, your question, or you raised an actual pretty interesting thing talking about the suburbs and exurbs, right? So I want to shift a little bit to congressional races. We've seen a bit of a shift for the suburbs like Westerville that you mentioned, kind of maybe turning more blue. do you see any, and maybe not the way the lines are drawn right now in Ohio, or may not be at play, but do you see any congressional races potentially being up for grabs in 2020, but maybe looking further down the road in terms of when the lines get redrawn?
Sure, thanks, Tom. So, I think the most vulnerable congressional race in the state is the first district down in the Cincinnati area, Steve Shabbat. He's running against a couple different contenders, Nikki Foster and Keith Schroeder, both candidates that are running against him. And his district, has been losing support within his own party, within the GOP party for a while. So I think that he's going to be one of those that can potentially flip in 2020. There's an interesting race in Columbus in the fact that it's a primary race. So Joyce Beatty is the third district congressional representative from Ohio, and she has an opponent that's coming out of the AOC camp. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, I'm sure I butchered her name, I'm sorry. But, so she has a primary that's gonna take place in the spring. So you got a couple races that are very interesting, but I think that the one that's gonna be watched the most, at least from the DCCC standpoint, is gonna be that Shabbat race down in the first congressional district.
And I would add to that Ohio 13. I think Tim Ryan's gonna draw an opponent. I'm not gonna make any news or anything here, but my parents grew up in the Mahoning Valley. He's been one of these guys that since day one has always talked about either being governor, United States Senator, and we've seen his audition for president. He had a failed attempt at that, he had a failed attempt at speaker. I think he has drifted away from the constituency that he represents, changing some key opinions on some issues. And I think he's vulnerable, and we'll see if I'm right.
I'm back on. So I do think that there's some assumptions we had. The other big thing heading in 2020 is the census. And most pundits believe that when the new census comes out, that Ohio, with the population loss, is likely to lose another congressional seat. And I think many folks believe that if you look at the demographic shifts in the state and the population shifts, that seat very well may come out of Northeast Ohio. Since we're in Canton, I think this is probably an important topic to discuss is, if that happens, what is, if you do lose another congressional seat, what is the impact for both the region and Ohio, both in terms of not just political play, but also, congressional and the ability to draw down funds, et cetera. Just kind of get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so it's a real concern. Ohio's been losing population for several years, but we're not alone. There are 5 other states that are losing population as well, that border, some of them border us. So Michigan, Pennsylvania, Illinois, Minnesota, and New York are all losing population as well. And anytime you lose a congressional seat, you're gonna lose funding, you're gonna lose out on all types of different opportunities for grants coming to your state. So, that is something that we may have to face after this 2020 census.
Yeah, I think it depends on how the count is done in terms of counting American citizens and non-citizens, and we'll see how that plays itself out. I think from a redistricting standpoint, because of the sort of self-selection or geographic self-selection of Democrats and Republicans, I think it's really hard for the Democrats to draw more districts than 4, maybe 5 in the state. It just geographically becomes such a huge challenge for that to be the case. But look, we'll see what happens in the count. I mean, to the question, Tom. I mean, Cuyahoga County is now under 1 million people. I mean, your congressional district size is gonna go up from 700 some to close to 900,000. I mean, that's practically just one member in Cuyahoga County. And so where does that lead you, you know, as you draw these things out?
So let me segue to the State House races. I don't think Senator Alhoff is here yet, so we can have freedom of discussion right now. I think the GOP currently holds a supermajority in both the House and the Senate. They've had supermajority in the Senate for several years now, and in the House for probably about the last 6 years. Derek, how do you see any chance of Democrats kind of at least breaking through the supermajority and picking up some legislative seats? But really, I think what's been driving a lot of it at the State House has been there's just been a overwhelming dominance in terms of fundraising by House and Senate Republicans. And can you see the Democrats finally maybe breaking through a little bit on that as well?
Sure. Well, first, before I answer that, I mean, you have a supermajority because they're very heavily gerrymandered districts in Ohio. So when you gerrymander districts that gives one party an unfair advantage over another, then of course you're gonna have a supermajority. But having said that, I think that if the Democrats can pick up just 2 seats in the House, I think that that's a victory for them. You have a very aggressive and smart minority leader in Amelia Sykes, and I think that she has her caucus on mission to go out and talk to voters and recruit good candidates and raise the money necessary to get their message out to the state of Ohio. So I think that we're not going to be fully competitive, but I think we'll be competitive enough to hopefully pick up a couple seats.
Yeah, the Republicans are blessed with a pretty strong caucus in both chambers and smart political teams in both chambers, and we have the lines we have for one more cycle. We'll see after that, but one of the other advantages we have is Jane Timken, local gal here, does a great job as state party chair. We have an infrastructure in place and staff that allows us to do a lot of things. In particular, last election cycle, focusing on early vote absentee ballots and focusing mainly on that one component, I think was very beneficial to the governor and other statewide and legislative candidates here in Ohio. So I think that's a big factor or big asset in terms of the Republican end of the scale.
Bob, you got your start in the State House a couple decades ago. Derek, you and I are still working at the State House regularly. I think we have seen firsthand the impact that term limits has had on the General Assembly and how the legislature operates. I think some of the change in the power shift and the dynamics in terms of decision making, maybe being a little bit more centralized within the caucus, but really I think it's made the governor's office, the governorship, a little bit much more powerful. And you lose a lot of the institutional knowledge. So this might be a little bit of a leading question, but when it comes to term limits, do you think that it's had a positive effect with the General Assembly, or is it time to revisit, at a minimum, the length of the terms, how long a member can serve? Is it maybe do we go the opposite way and now no longer allow some of the, there's a lot of jumping between House and Senate, or do away with term limits altogether?
Sure. So, term limits, as you said, every time a member of the legislature leaves, they empower not only the lobbying community and the special interest community, but also the media, because those are the 2 entities that are constant at the State House, right? So folks like me and others in the room that are in the lobbying community becomes the institutional knowledge. I think term limits had a short-term positive effect because people were fed up with politicians that were staying in in office forever. There were a number of scandals that happened back in the early nineties and mid nineties. So I think that fed into term limits. But we're at a point now where I really think that we need to revisit term limits. The only people that don't, again, this is my opinion, I think that the voters miss out when you have to change representatives every few years. I mean, the ultimate term limit should be left up to the voter. And if the voter feels that an elected official is doing a good enough job to stay in office, they should be able to stay. And I'm not sure if term limits will ever go away completely, but I think that we need to look at the time frame in which our elected leaders get to stay in office.
Just to be clear, I'm speaking for myself personally here, and I agree with everything Derek said.
So we have a few more questions, but we will be taking questions from you. So if you start thinking about them, write them down on note cards if you want, or else we can always call on you as well. But we'll take questions from the audience in a few more minutes. So Governor DeWine is finishing his first year in office. In his first year, he's had a busy year. He's proposed a big gas tax increase. He signed the heartbeat bill. He's put significant new spending into early childhood education, mental health services, the H2O fund. I work for community colleges, so I get yelled at by Parif. I didn't recognize the significant new investments in workforce training, like through Tech Cred, that the governor has pushed through. And he's trying to push a somewhat controversial gun control measure around the State House, or through the State House. So I'm curious of how you would grade Governor DeWine's first year in office.
A plus. Yeah, come on, I'm a home team guy. What do you expect? No, honestly, Mike DeWine's governed a lot like successful Republican governors have governed in the state before. It's hard to see how he doesn't get reelected because he's, getting things done. And it's hard to argue with that.
Listen, I give credit where credit is due. Everybody in this room knows I'm a Democrat. I give the governor a B+. I think that he's doing a phenomenal job up until this point. Now, obviously, there are things, policy issues that I don't necessarily agree with him on, but I think that he has definitely been an accessible governor. He's reached out to various different minority groups across the state. The gas tax was major for this state. We hadn't passed a gas tax in how many years? 20 some odd years. And to have a gas tax not only is going to create jobs, but it's going to strengthen our infrastructure, and it's going to make us, improve our roads and our infrastructure. So those types of things, when you first come out the gate, to have that be one of your first initiatives, I think it's good. Now, we are in his, first year? So, it might be F by this time next year, who knows? But for now, I think he's doing a pretty good job.
Derek, what do you think, one of the more fascinating things that we saw, which is very rare, was the fight over the speakership between now former legislator Ryan Smith and Larry Householder, and kind of the coalition government, if you will, that was formed in the deal that Speaker Householder made with the House Minority Leadership, particularly driven by some of the labor. I think that's had a positive impact, and I think the gas tax is one example that I don't think gets done without that coalition.
There's a spirit of bipartisanship in the House. Now, there's always going to be politics at the State House. They're going to take shots at the other side when they can, and the other side's going to take shots at us when they can. But I think that because they are talking and can have a productive dialogue, I think that that's good for everybody in the state. I was around when Speaker Householder was Speaker previously, and saw how he governed then. I mean, and he's a wheeler and dealer. And when speakership, you know, he was coming to the Black Caucus events. And he was talking to legislators there. He was going to other events that Democrats were holding. And he was actually lobbying those folks to try to get them to vote for him.
So, Bob, do you have any thoughts or no? Okay. So let's kind of fast forward, look ahead, maybe 4 or 6 years down the road. Bob, who do you see as kind of some young rising stars within the Republican Party? Maybe both state and if you have any thoughts nationally, but that we should maybe keep an eye on.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. I mean, we've got some great candidates at the statewide level, and to me, that's a big factor in winning elections. We as Republicans have done better, I think, at state elections for the constitutional offices because we've had a better farm system for candidates. I mean, and you take that experience and you translate it up, and you know, you remember when this particular person was a state rep somewhere or county commissioner, and now they're the auditor of the state or treasurer of state or whatnot. And I usually don't get into the predictive thing about personalities and stuff like that. Let me just say that you know, there's a great opportunity for young people to get involved in politics and to learn a lot. And you know, you've got like the Bliss Institute that gives young men and women practical experience in campaigns and elections. And to me, that's the most important thing. So when you have a lot of tough elections here in the state, it draws people in. We've got people that have come in from other states, have stayed. We've got people that start here and go other places. So it's too hard for me to kind of tag something like that.
Yeah, so there's a number of people on the Democratic side that are rising stars. I mean, I think I mentioned one of those in Minority Leader Sykes. I think that she's doing a phenomenal job with the Minority Caucus. But we got some great mayors around the state as well. You know, Nan Whaley is City of Dayton. You know, she got put into a very tough predicament with the Dayton tragedy and the tornadoes that went through there, and then the police officer that was shot and killed. So that community has gone through a lot, and I think that her leadership has been steadfast and has kept that community together. Andy Gimper, who's the mayor of Columbus, is doing a phenomenal job with moving that city forward. And then you got folks like, you know, John Cranley down in Cincinnati, who's doing a good job as mayor. So, you know, I feel good about our bench moving forward. Hopefully they won't take a cue from our presidential candidates and all run for governor at the same time. But I think that we got a good farm team moving forward. And I would also add Columbus City Attorney Zach Klein. I mean, he's somebody you should watch as well.
So, 2 more questions. One, which is actually sparked by something that Bob mentioned, and then that Bob Messner, his analogy on the book of Genesis. I'll tie them together. So,
This will be good.
you talked about how, you know, the book in terms of people moving and, you know, red and blue, it's very, like our society is kind of becoming very the tribalism, right? I don't like using that term, but, you know, Democrats and Republicans tend to be moving to the same areas. We're getting the same news, but from some different sources, and so we're hearing different messages, social media, and the impact that is having on really just overall civil discourse between between Democrats and Republicans. Do you see it ever getting better in terms of us being able to have?
Well, we have to remember that the history of the Republic is one where this divisiveness has always been there. It's been for different things at different times. I mean, you used to have, in the 19th century, you used to have a Republican newspaper and a Democrat newspaper in the same town. And some of the things that were said about Abraham Lincoln or Thomas Jefferson in the campaigns probably, would surprise a lot of people. We do this because it's a contest. We call them campaigns because it's like a battle, but it's not. I think that the civility, I think that there is challenges to civility in politics. I mean, look, Derek and I can sit up here and disagree, agree, and we're friends, we're always gonna be friends. For some people have a hard time with that. And that's, I don't know what you do about somebody's individual demeanor on it, but honestly, I think the Republic has suffered through a lot of challenges. And I think it's strong, it's going to continue to be strong, and I'm not overly worried about it. I mean, it's clear the Democrats do not like this president. I mean, they haven't liked him since the day he was elected, which is why they funded Green Party recounts in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. And then they tried to hijack the Electoral College. I was an elector. I got 4,000 pieces of mail telling me to do the right thing and vote for Hillary Clinton because she won the popular vote, even though I was obligated to vote for Donald Trump. And we've seen it time and time after again. This statue's missing for the White House, or the president did this and president that did that. And some things, a lot of things are manufactured or not real. And it sets up a combative environment. But look, that's kind of politics. It's a contest. And, as long as it doesn't go any further than that, I don't see a problem with it.
Derek, any thoughts? No? Okay. So this will be the last question. So if you have questions, hold your card up or hand up when we're done. We can recognize you. But so in the it's kind of in the spirit of the holiday season, we're all going to be spending a lot of family time together, which can often, after a couple of drinks, can turn ugly at times if politics comes up. So Derek, I want to ask you if you can give us an example of a policy or a proposal that Republican has put on the table that you support or think is good. And Bob, I'm going to do the opposite. If you can give us a Democrat proposal that you think is a positive that you would maybe like to see move forward.
I have nothing. No. So I alluded to it a little earlier. I think the spirit of bipartisanship is at the State House. I won't necessarily point to any proposal per se, but I think that when you can have a productive dialogue about issues, whether you agree about those issues or not, I think that's a good thing. I've been through General Assemblies where the other side just wouldn't talk to the other side. And so you have one-sided legislation. And anytime you have one-sided legislation, then you have bad legislation for the whole state of Ohio. So I think that the fact that we have a speaker and a minority leader that can actually talk, I think that the fact that we have a Senate president and a minority leader over in the Senate that can talk, and a governor that's willing to listen, I think that that's a good thing for the people.
Yeah, I think that, let me not answer it directly, but sort of indirectly. A lot of what the president campaigned on and talked about, dealing with these bad trade deals, putting American workers first, are things that used to be the bread and butter of the Democratic Party, and they're not. I mean, there is the reason we did so well in the Mahoning Valley is because we spoke to those issues in a way that Hillary Clinton was either incapable of doing or chose not to. And I think that while Derek's right that the Democrats had come to Westerville to sort of drive that home, not one thing in that debate really hit towards those issues. Everything else was focused on these other issues that I think are being driven by the far left wing of the Democratic Party. And I think it's a disservice to the party. Look, as a Bliss guy, Ray Ray Bliss was about the two-party system. He said one of the great benefits to our country was a strong Republican Party and a strong Democratic Party. And while he was always trying to win elections, he always recognized that fact. I agree with that. And in many ways, we'll see how this sort of turns up.
Well, that's it. We'll turn it over to you for any questions.
Is this anonymous?
What's that?
Is this an anonymous question? A lot of that going around.
There. How can we mobilize young voters and get them to the polls in 2020?
Well, you know, the young voters that are voting and participating in elections were different than when Bob's still running campaigns, I'm not. But when we were both running campaigns, and I think that there are different things that motivate them. But having a good message, you know, having a campaign that young people feel like that they can tap into and be a part of, I think that that's important. And I don't think that anybody likes the divisiveness that's happening right now. And I would say that's on both sides of the aisle. You know, some things are being caused, in my opinion, by the president. But you know, there's enough divisiveness to go around on both sides of the aisle, and I think that turns people off. So that's the reason why you see half the country or half of the state is supporting impeachment and half is not. Because you always got those partisan folks that are just going to be anything that's against the other person. And I'm one of those people that if, you know, I might not agree with you politically, but if it's right, it's right. And if it's wrong, it's wrong. Right? But you have some people that are just out there and no matter what the issue is, they're just going to take partisan side. So I think that having a good message, having a candidate that folks can look up to, that's how you're going to get people more involved and more young people involved in our electoral system.
Yeah, there's an interesting thing about younger voters, 18 to 25. They vote in their first election, and then you don't see them for like 8 or 10 years. It's really kind of interesting as a factor. Look, we try to reach out because, you know, younger voters, you know, they tend to be focused on different issues than older voters, so it presents some challenges. But we do outreach on the campuses and through different groups, and in times we're pretty successful at it. So, you know, we come with a philosophy that you don't leave any kind of constituency unattended. Like I feel my job is to reach out to working men and women in organized labor, and I think we've got a great opportunity to earn the support of those constituencies. We had some in 2016, but also with Black and Hispanic voters, record low unemployment puts us in a position where we can start to have a conversation where before, you know, Republicans had a more difficult time starting that conversation. But yeah, younger voters, that's a hard one.
Next question is, what is the role of social media in the 2020 election? And do the social media companies have some type of responsibility to maybe ensure that some of the content, I guess maybe controlling the fake news of the content that's being delivered across their sites?
So let me start this one. In the campaign in Ohio in 2016, the spending breakout for us on digital media versus traditional broadcast media was 50-50, which I thought was crazy. But I wasn't making the media buys in Ohio. Because traditionally up until that point, it was about 85-15, 90-10, and this was a huge departure. And I think it was beneficial. This is, I think, something I was wrong about. So I think you're going to see a lot more focused advertising digitally, both through social media platforms and directly. Look, in terms of social media and you know, you hear hear folks on the left and folks have the right to have similar opinions about what happens, what's fake news and what's not fake news. But honestly, I mean, when you think about it, the First Amendment franchise is most important in the space of political campaigns. And to try to control that or throttle that or to, I mean, how do you edit something like that? And especially in a time where you've got a congressional hearing right now where there are two different realities on either side of the aisle about what's happening and what's not happening. And I just don't see from a practical matter why you would give that kind of influence to a particular platform, company, whatever, to make those decisions.
Yeah, you know, my 17-year-old twins, this is all they use. They have TVs for days, but they look at everything on their phone, right? So social media is critically important to campaigns. You know, when I was actively working in the campaign world, and I know Bob remembers this too, you know, we would go to each door and we would have a clipboard with each voter's name on it. And we would knock on that door to see if those folks were gonna vote or not. And that's how we had, you know, basically our.
So you told everyone we're really old.
Right, and then it went to Palm Pilots. I don't know how many of you remember Palm Pilots, right? But now everything is done electronically. And so, in kids and young voters, they get a lot of their news from social media. So it's critically important that medium is used in elections. Now, I do think that there should be some penalties if you're putting fake news out there intentionally.
I'm waiting for that to happen to CNN.
Well, same with
No,
Fox.
but I mean, seriously, you know, where do you draw the line? And incidentally, if you're on Facebook, you're old and lame. TikTok is the new thing, as my daughters have informed me. You on TikTok? Anyone here on TikTok?
No, but yeah, Facebook.
Insta?
No,
Okay,
it's
yeah.
Instagram.
Yes, it's a generational thing. It's
Yeah.
like political consultants used to drink scotch, the generation before me, then we were all drinking vodka, my generation. I think now they're on to bourbon. So
White
that's
Claw.
the cool thing. Yeah. No self-respecting person drinks White Claw. Is that a bipartisan thing we can agree on? If you drink it like, oh, jeez. Oh, okay, good, thank God. Our friendship was about to end.
I'm not gonna invite you over to my house and say, hey, you want a White Claw?
Yeah.
That's it for the written questions. Are there any questions? Yep.
I wasn't gonna submit these and let Bob take the written words, to a different place, but Derek, I had a question really for you. You know, we talked about, Bob talked a little bit about the Electoral College. Elizabeth Warren has said that she wants to be the last president elected by the Electoral College. And that she wants to eliminate it because it's fair to elect a president by popular vote. And seemingly, the Democratic Party has taken that. Some of the Democratic Party has taken that tone of the Electoral College isn't fair because we lost to the president, President Trump. You know, as far as Ohio is concerned, I'm interested in your opinion on the Electoral College as far as how Ohio would potentially benefit from what Elizabeth Warren is saying, and or how we walk that back from them trying to take the Electoral College.
Yeah, you know, I don't think there's any harm in looking at historically why we have the Electoral College and why it's in existence today and have that discussion of whether we need it or not. You know, I think that that's always healthy to have that type of dialogue. You know, obviously, Al Gore won a popular vote, right? And lost in the Electoral College to President Bush. So, it's the process we have right now. And until we have a meaningful discussion around the Electoral College, what it means, what's the historical nature of it, then I don't think that it's going anywhere.
You'd have to amend the Constitution, obviously, but here from a constituent standpoint, as long as you live in the state of Ohio, you want the Electoral College. Because if you don't have it, your vote doesn't matter. It honestly does not matter. We will have a president of California and New York, and that'll be it. And if you think I'm wrong, then, I mean, I just don't know what to tell you. Why would anybody come and campaign in Ohio? I mean, why does anyone campaign in New Hampshire or Iowa? It's because they're the first contest. And because they're swing states. Because if you need maybe 2 electoral votes to win the Electoral College, no one will pay any attention to the flyover country of which happily I live in.
Sir.
Is Stark County going to be in play in 2020?
Well, yes, I do think so. I think that Stark County will be in play, of course it will. It's part of Northeast Ohio, it's part of that shifting dynamic that we have been talking about a little earlier in the program. You know, the dynamics and the numbers are changing, so of course this county is gonna be in play, you know.
I mean,
You got a good mix of urban and rural voters. And I think that that's the reason why Stark County is important.
Yeah, it's a good barometer. I mean, traditionally, if you look at previous elections, both Stark County and Clark County in the Southwest are similar in calling it right most of the time.
Any other questions? Okay. Jennifer's walking up to put it into it. Well, hey, thank you very much for this discussion. I think it's been fascinating to hear. We all know that next year is the most important election of our lifetime, which was preceded by the most important election of our lifetime last year, which was most important of a lifetime in 2016. So thank you both to Derek and Bob for doing this. This has been a great discussion.
Thank you, Derek, Tom, and Bob. We could, give them a round of applause. We got this. Thanks a lot. And I think we are just waiting on Senate President Larry Alhoff to join us. And as soon as he's here, we will move on to his remarks. So you have just a few moments. So if you do have other questions, I think our 3 panelists will be around just for a moment. If you didn't get a chance to ask questions, feel free to do so. So thank you.
Sure.